Hello. Now I want to talk about tocophobia and whether or not you have it. Maybe you're wondering, is what I'm experiencing tocophobia, or do I just simply don't want kids? And the line here can be very, very murky. So I just want to talk that through because it depends is the answer to that. Now, a lot of women don't want kids. They don't ever see themselves being a mother. It's not part of the life they imagine for themselves, and that's perfectly fine. Not everyone, not every female woman, however you want to express that, is here to bear children and to be a mother. But sometimes when you say you don't want kids, it is your fear talking. That was me for many, many years. So I know how that feels. And when I was someone who felt that they weren't going to have kids, I was able to come up with lots of really good reasons why that would be a sensible choice for me to make. So there are too many people on the planet, right? Way too many people on the planet. And the world's going to shit. Why would I want to bring a child into this world when there are already too many people on the planet and it's going to shit? That was one thing that was my go-to excuse for not having kids for many, many years. And that's a perfectly good reason, right? That is perfectly fine to have that as a reason for not wanting kids. And also there are many children that have been abandoned, that don't have parents, don't have people to look after them, that could do with a really good loving home. So, if you want kids, then there are lots of kids out there that would love to have some loving parents to look after them. So not wanting biological kids or kids full stop, that's a question to kind of ask yourself. Personally, I was never really able to allow my mind to go beyond the point of kids. I couldn't even think about kids so the idea of whether they were biological or not wasn't even something that my mind could even entertain, because the whole kid part of my brain was just shut down. Now, the reason it was shut down was because of fear. When someone doesn't want kids and there isn't fear coming in there, then they're able to really kind of think it through in quite some detail and in a very calm way, and articulate in ways that make a lot of sense to most people why they want to do that. Some people can appreciate both sides of an argument. So if you're able to articulate your reasons for or not wanting kids in a very calm way, then the chances are you don't want kids. With women that have tocophobia, they can get incredibly defensive around this point and emotional and touchy. And that's a clue that there's probably some fear lurking around this thing of having children. Because fear is very, very good at tricking you and making you think things. And it will help you to come up with what sound like perfectly good reasons to back up your stance. So one thing that some women with tocophobia might do, and I've heard a lot of women say this, is, well, if I could just have an artificial womb and grow my baby in a tank, then that's the way, that I'm fine with that. Now, when I hear that, I'm horrified. The idea of growing a baby in a tank just sounds like the most unnatural thing ever. You just don't see that in nature. It just feels horrifying for me to imagine how that child will grow without the loving arms of a mother, without the safety of the womb, how nature intended, basically. That's not how we are. So that does not feel like a reasonable thing to do or to want for a new human being, to be growing basically in a test tube or a lab or it just all feels like it's heading in the wrong direction in terms of the right thing for humanity. So if someone is saying that this is a perfectly reasonable thing, then that is a clue that there's probably fear behind this, overlaying on top of that to make that sound like a perfectly reasonable thing. Some women that have a fear of the birthing process will say, well, let's go down the biological route or the fostering route. And that may be a clue that there's some fear there around birthing, around being pregnant, that they want to avoid. They could also be wanting to go down the fostering or non-biological route because they just want to help other kids. They just want to be there and mother other kids that need that love and support. And that doesn't mean they have tocophobia. There could be, that's absolutely, that could be a situation as well. I'm going to go back to, how are they expressing this? So when you think about wanting children that aren't yours or wanting to foster, when you're tuning into that, how does that feel for you? When you tune into the thought of having biological children, how does that feel? If it feels really icky and contracting and tense, and, if there's a kind of overwhelming sense of, the biological route doesn't feel comfortable, then that is a clue to this fear there. Or let's say you want to foster or you want to adopt, and then you also tune into this idea of having your own kids. You could tune into it, go, I could, but I just want to help. There's so many kids that need parents loving. That's what I want. And that you don't find that kind of contraction, that tension when you tune into the biological route. It's kind of absent. You're really just drawn to wanting to help and to be there for kids that really need that support. So it's really tuning into how this kind of makes you feel as an individual. And that is really where you can start tuning into whether there is fear that needs to be dealt with. And only you will know this. And some women might go, well, no, I don't have a problem. This isn't a problem. Me having tocophobia isn't a problem. I don't need to sort it out. No, you don't need to sort it out. But for me, carrying around a lot of fear and tension and anger and resentment that I might feel towards people that ask me the question, so when you're going to have kids, that kind of like defensive response that might come out, that feeling I feel when I'm being asked things that make me feel super, super uncomfortable. I don't want to feel that way. Like, that life is too short to have to deal with feelings like that. I would much rather feel joy, happiness, calm, peace inside than be juggling feelings like resentment and anger. So why you might say, well, I don't need to deal with this. I'm not broken. I don't need fixing in some way. No, but we can all benefit from letting go of our fears and letting go of these emotions that weigh us down in ways that are simply not helpful to us and the people around us. These emotions don't really serve us when they're kind of stuck and trapped within our system. So facing up to them, healing ourselves of them, healing ourselves of the triggers that bring these emotions in the first place is well worth doing. And don't do it for anybody else. Do it for yourself, because you will be a happier person as a result of that. And that is, for me, if there's only one reason that you choose to do the kind of work that requires overcoming something like tocophobia, then to be happier is a perfectly good reason and very worthwhile one to go for, in my view. So there are many things that we experience, fears, resentment, anger, on lots of facets of life, not just around having children. And I would encourage you to think about addressing any anger or fear you have in any aspect of your life, not just around the child rearing one, the mothering one. But I definitely think that if you were to face doing this kind of work, uncovering the roots of why you feel the way that you do around not having children, then one thing that you'll be able to do is trust your judgment as to whether or not you want kids or not. I've had a lot of women come to me who are late 30s, early 40s, late 40s, who want to make peace with themselves for having missed out on having kids, because they thought for many, many years they're able to kind of pretend that they didn't want kids, and they rationalize, and they, there's too many people on the planet, and all these kind of things to kind of make it make sense that it was perfectly acceptable for them to choose not to have kids. But when their back was against the wall, when they suddenly realised that their time was up, that this was no longer an option for them, that it really hit them, that they'd been lying to themselves all those years. And now they had to make peace with that and live with that. And that was very difficult for them to do. And so they come to me after they can't have children to simply clear all that stuff within them so they can at least live with the decision they've made. Because if you reach that point where suddenly you are finally honest with yourself and you realize that actually you did want children, that you're bullshitting yourself the whole time, you're the one that's got to live with yourself for the rest of your life. And that is the kind of stuff that builds resentment, bitterness, anger inside, that nobody really wants to have to carry that stuff through to their grave. So, if you're wondering whether or not you've got tocophobia or not, then I would urge you to just run headlong into your fears and your psyche and your anxieties and your stresses and try and figure it out, because do it while you've got time, where you can really trust that part of you that is saying, no, I don't want kids. I've worked with many women who weren't able to trust their decision. They're like, well, I don't think I want kids, but I'm just not sure if it's the fear speaking. And so they wanted to do the work so they could just reach that place and know in their heart of hearts that they don't want kids. Can you tune into your heart and go, no, I actually don't want kids. I don't want them. It's not for me. And my life is full of riches in other ways. And I don't need them. I don't want them. We have a fantastic relationship. It's not for me. And to sit there and really sit with that and feel it in a really expansive way. If you can't do that, the chances are there's something there blocking you from really connecting to that perspective within yourself. Because when you can say that to yourself, you can trust it. And then you are more likely to then live your life without regret, which means without the resentment, without the anger, without all of that. Because let's say, you 10 years down the line, you think, oh yeah, maybe kids, that would have been nice. No, but I decided, I was really clear, and I knew then that I didn't. And you can trust yourself. And so in that moment, the resentment won't be there. You might be a slight regret. It might be, oh, well, maybe it would have been nice. But it won't come loaded with all these emotions that over time have festered and become something a little bit more dark and sinister. So tune into how you feel truly. And if you can't connect this feeling of this heart sense that you really don't want kids, then there probably is something going on there. And you are rationalizing, your mind is coming up with ways to help you feel better about where you're at, which is, I can't go there. I'm terrified of birth. Who the hell am I to be a mother? I have no idea what I'm doing. It's just going to be a parasite feeding off me while I'm carrying it, and it's going to be horrific and I might die. And all of these things that are common thoughts and feelings that women with tocophobia have. Once you've worked on the fears, a lot of those things fall by the wayside because they're no longer a thing. The parasite thing was something that I felt deeply. I would always think of the film Aliens when I could think of a baby moving in a belly and seeing it, and it was always an X-Files thing or an Aliens movie thing, and it was just horrific. Just seeing a woman stroking her belly was something I just could not do. It was too disgusting for me to even look at and made me shudder. And yet, once I'd worked on all of the fears that I had around this thing feeding off me, a parasite feeding off its host, that's not at all how I was feeling. This is just what I came up with in my mind to back up my story, which was, I don't want kids. I was just backing myself up the whole time because the mind does not want you to be wrong. It wants you to be right. So it's going to create all these things behind the scenes to make you right. Once you face up to your fears and you realize that you don't need to be made right, those things just collapse. They just fall by the wayside. So if you don't know whether you are tocophobic, you don't know whether or not you want kids or not, then I would just urge you to connect to this idea of kids or no kids and just see what that tells you. Because that is going to be the best way for you to really identify whether or not you have it or not. If you're watching this and you've got a partner who you don't know whether or not she wants children or not, then I would urge you to observe her behaviour when she's being asked around the children conversation. And is the response a reactive, defensive, snappy kind of response, which seems to indicate there's something there that potentially needs looking at? Or is it, no, I just don't want them. It's a calm, no, just don't want them. Or is it a, will you stop asking me? That kind of thing. To be fair, a lot of women get these questions all the time, and it's nobody's business, right? It's nobody's business whether or not she's going to have kids or not. But her partner has got every right to know, because if he wants kids, if maybe she intimated that at the beginning of the relationship and now, now it's a no, then he might want to make other plans with somebody else so that he can have a family. So it's perfectly reasonable for your partner to get answers. It's also perfectly reasonable for a woman to change her mind. So this is a very delicate area, of course, but I think the thing that we can all benefit from doing is just tuning in and being truthful and honest about who we are and what we want. And the sooner that we're able to identify that for ourselves and communicate that to others who are important in our lives, who kind of do have the right to know, then that's going to be better all round. So I hope that this has been helpful for anyone who is struggling with whether or not they think they have tocophobia or not.